Jeremy Candelaria, welcome to Beautifully Restored. So excited to have you on here. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me, Melissa. I appreciate it. It's an honor.
Well, I feel that way about you. I met you once in real life, in the human form, outside of the Zoom rooms. We met in October at a business boot camp that we were both at. I heard you speak and was so moved by you. I think because we're the same person.
That's
we're
right.
we're kind of the same person. Like you're the man form, I'm the woman form. We have so many similarities. It's wild. And I think that's what's drawn both of us together to this day to talk and to learn more about each other. So tell the listeners a little bit about yourself. What do you do and what are you all about?
Man, there's so much. That's such a big, huge bag of possibilities there. So the lowest hanging fruit would be I have been married for 20 plus years to my high school sweetheart. And so she's put up with me for 20, almost 5 years now. I was 15 when I started dating her, got married at 18.
Wow.
And we have four kids. So 18, 16, 13, and 11. And I do pastor a church full time, but I also run a seven-figure concrete company here in Akron, Ohio. And in addition to that, I love to write books. So best-selling author, new best-selling author. So that's pretty cool. So best-selling author,
Very
and
cool.
thank you. And then also really just love helping people. So whether you'd call it coaching or sort of like a discipline development strategist, something like that, that's kind of my passion. So there's a lot of things that I have going on in my life. And I think most of them involve serving other people.
Yeah, I think that's one of the cool similarities between you and I is because we both have a ministry background. We both are coaching. We both are into fitness. We both have a blue collar type job and
Yeah.
business that we're running and working in. And we just love helping people. And that literally sums both of us up in so many ways. So
Well, you are me. I
I
am you.
know.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Same
You
person.
have better hair than I do, but I'll give you that.
Yeah, well, I'll let you give that to me. That's great.
Okay.
So what came first? I don't even understand. So what came first? The ministry, the concrete business? Tell me.
Yeah, so that's a really great question, and I'll try to be brief. I really will. But for many years, it was since I was 15. Basically, at 15 years old, I got called into the ministry, and the reason or the way that that happened was my aunt, after I became a Christian, said that she called me and she said, "Would you be interested in preaching on Sunday at our church?" And I had never preached. I've never spoken publicly ever. And I said, sure, why not? I don't know what preaching is. And I'll never forget, it was the Salvation Security System. That was the title of my message. And I was standing up in a suit in front of 200 gray hair people, and I was preaching. And after I got done preaching, the woman pastor came up to me and she handed me an envelope. And I was 15. So my mom, who that's a story in and of itself, I probably should kind of hit on that. But she was driving me because I couldn't drive. I didn't have a driver's license. We got in the car and she's driving, and I open up this envelope and there's a check for $25. And I was like, oh my gosh, that is it. Like here's what I heard: for the rest of your life, you are going to preach and you're going to take care of your family. And I didn't even have a family at that time, but I knew that that's what I was going to give my life to. And so at 15, I started down really this road of training and reading the scriptures and studying. And I just loved it. I loved helping people and kind of gravitated toward mentorship, and really got married at 18. And that was because I had a difficult home life, didn't have any stability or structure, and I wanted it, I craved it. And so sort of manifest that and got married at 18. My wife was 19, actually in the church that I pastor, which is totally unrelated, crazy story. But I'm sitting in here right now. But nonetheless, got married, went off to the army, came back, went to college, and then planted a church. So we planted a church. And the reason why we planted a church is because I knew that there was so much, there was so much going on in the church that nobody ever wanted to talk about. And And I knew that because I was married to somebody and had dated somebody that was a part of a denomination that was very sectarian, very separatistic, and it was all about works-based righteousness. If I do good and I do all the right things, then God will love me and God will accept me. And man, I just kept blowing it. I could only white knuckle it so much before I screwed up. And then I thought, well, am I the only one that's not getting this? By the way, my wife was really good at being good. She still is, by the way, really good at being good. I'm not really good at being good. And so I would look at her and I would go, okay, she has parents that are still married. They've always been married. My parents never were married. My mom was addicted to crack cocaine. She dated the dealer. We lived in hotels. My wife, her parents, she lived on the same road until she got married. Like, we are completely the opposite sides of the spectrum kind of people. Well, when you marry each other at 18 and 19 years old, and you have to have sex with each other and you have to figure out life with each other, naturally, you're going to have friction. And so she was very good at being good. I wasn't very good at being good. Then just made stupid, bad, horrible decisions because I didn't understand that God doesn't love you just when you're good. And it brought me to this place where I began to realize that God doesn't love me when I'm good. He loves me when I'm very bad. And because he loves me when I'm very bad, that therefore makes me good. This is the gospel. This is the essence of the gospel, that while we were still sinners, Christ died. Like, while we were still in the act of flicking him off and spitting in his face and pulling his beard out, he died for me. And that began to change me. And so that was the impetus of us planting our first church, it's called Movement. It's still going on today. They're incredible. And basically it was a safe place for people who are far from God to come close. And my whole thing was, I wanted to create a place where we could be real, where we could remove the fig leaf and say, I am jacked up. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to seek help because I'm hurting. And to me, I think that that's what the church is supposed to be. It's supposed to be a hospital for sinners, not a sanctuary for saints. And it worked, man. It grew and grew and grew, and hundreds of people got saved. And we really were a place for people who are broken to find hope and healing in Jesus, and for real, the gospel. Well, then we got comfortable because it was like the church was here. They had a salary for me. It was like we had friends. Everything was cool. Our kids, were kind of grown. We were in a good place. So my dad, who lives out in California, that's where I was born. I'm in Ohio now. He had a heart attack. So my wife and I were like, you know what? If something happens to him and we're not there, I would feel horrible. So we flew out to California. While in California, we both sort of had this epiphany. Why don't we do out here what we've done back in Ohio? And so we prayed about it, and it was like a 2-year process because I wanted my 4 kids. I believe in raising your kids with your grandkids in mind, meaning the things that they would grow up and hate about you really battle that now so that it sort of works itself out. So we were very careful, and I'm talking, stop me if I'm talking too much, okay?
No, you're good.
We were very careful about this process because I had teenagers at the time. It was like 15, 13, like 9 and 8 or something like that, 7. And so we had a family meeting, sat the kids down, said, hey, listen, we feel like God's calling us away from Movement East to Movement West, which is what we call the church there. And we're not going to go until all of you are ready, because my one prayer request to God was, I'll leave everything, salary, friends, everything we built, blood, sweat, tears. I mean, it's hard to plant a church. It's easy to build a business. I've done that. Hard to plant a church. And that's actually working. And so I said, God, I'll do anything, but my one request is that you make all of our kids want to go. Which would have been a miracle anyway, because they argued over what we were going to go to dinner, what we were going to eat for food, right? I mean, this is 2,013 miles across the United States. So 2 years it took for my oldest daughter to finally come to me after a Wednesday night, like they called it the exchange student ministry at our church. I picked her up and she said, Dad, I'm ready. I said, what do you mean you're ready? And she said, I'm ready. I'm ready to go. And so I said, okay, why don't you just hold that thought for 2 weeks, and then if you're still ready, we'll talk about it. Well, she went in and convinced all of us that this was the best thing for us to do. And literally within 6 months, we had a succession plan. The student pastor became the senior pastor. We said, we're expanding. We packed up everything we owned into a Penske truck and our dog and our cat, and we moved across the United States. And we had a sweet setup because the church here was successful. We partnered with the denomination over there, and they supplied a building, they supplied my pay, everything. They were really banking on us. And we were in Palm Springs, which is just a crazy place in and of itself to plant a church. So we went out there, didn't know anybody, planted this church. It really took off. But as it continued to go well, my family fell apart. And namely my daughter, my oldest daughter, who said she was ready. And I started drinking heavy. I mean, we were far away from everybody, no support system. My kids were crying themselves to sleep. It was rough. My wife and I, we were the support system. No cousins, grandma, not really grandma. There wasn't anybody there. I'm trying to plant a church from nothing in a place I don't know. I don't know anyone. So different from Ohio, so different from the Midwest. And so it's still doing well. She's crying herself to sleep. My other daughter is too, for different reasons. My oldest daughter started flunking out of every class. And what's interesting, Mel, is like when I was young and we moved everywhere, like there was no cell phone. You know, it's like, hey, Jimmy, we're moving to Florida now, which we did. Man, if I ever come back, maybe I'll ride my bike over to your house and see if you still live there. And if you do, we'll hang out. Well, for her, she couldn't disconnect here long enough to connect there. And all her friends were, you know, we miss you so much. We hope you come back. And she just kept going down and down and down and down and down and down and down. And till it got to the point where I've always said I have to either choose between ministry and my family. If I have to choose between ministry and my family, I'm going to choose my family. I am not going to kill my family. That's why we waited so long. And by the way, I was so pissed, if I can say that, I was so angry at God because I had prayed one thing. I only asked for one thing, and that is that my kids would want to be there. They'd want to go. Well, the two older ones didn't. While we were there, they were miserable. The two younger ones loved it, but we're praying, God, please just give them one friend, just anything, please, whatever we can do. And it just wouldn't happen. And so I finally made a decision. The decision was at another family meeting. I said, hey, what kind of dad would I be if I could take away your pain, but I chose not to? So we're moving back. And immediately Emily went up and packed her bag. She's like, I'm ready, let's go. And the younger one started crying, and it was a really wild, emotional thing. But in that moment, I was like, you know what? Actually, my son, who is an amazing young man, he's 13. He said, Dad, is this what God wants? And I literally said, that's between me and God right now. And what I really was saying was, I don't care. I don't care because I'm your dad and I'm going to do what's best for you right now. And so we literally packed everything up. We had to kind of move those people into another church. I had to go to my boss and say, listen, thank you for the money. Thank you for the investment. Thank you for the building. Thank you for believing in me. But my family's first priority. And he shut the door and he said, Jeremy, I've never raised my kids based on denominational vote or church vote. He said, your first ministry is to your family. And as far as I'm concerned, you can hold your head up high. And then I said, that's so nice of you. Can I have one more payment so I can get home? And he did grant that. We moved into my mother and father-in-law's house upstairs. I told my kids, they wanted to come back, and I was angry because I had prepared for ministry. I had been in ministry for 20 years, and it was everything to me. It was not everything, but very high. Obviously, my kids were greater, and they saw that through this. So here we are, 6 of us in an upstairs of a small house, totally uncomfortable, sleeping on floors, futons kind of revolving around. If you got to sleep on the futon, tomorrow you're sleeping on the floor. And I wrote before I left, I'm going to start a concrete company, make it a lot of money, never go into the ministry again, and just focus on my family, not serving other people. I was done. I remember we'd go back to a church, not the church we planted back here in Ohio. We tried it. And my wife bawled the entire time. She just cried because she's like, it's us. It's like our DNA. And people didn't even know who we were. It was really wild. So we went to another church sort of similar to ours. And they're singing these songs like, you're a good, good father. It's who you are. It's who you are. And I remember by the way, this is 2017. I remember 2017, 18. I remember just balling my fist up, going, that's not true. That's not true. You're not. you know, and kind of kept that in, really struggled, started our business. Um, the first year in our business, we did 400,000. It was just me. I literally I borrowed $4,000 to buy a dump truck. It was a used dump truck, and built that thing the first year to 400,000. The second year it grew to 700,000. Last year we did a million, just over a million. And this is our fourth year. But the weird thing that started happening with all of this is somebody about 2.5 years ago came to me and said, hey, our pastor's retiring after 22 years. It's a traditional church. They really need a young, this is what they said, it's not what I'm saying, a younger, dynamic person to transition this thing. And I was like, nope. Matter of fact, honestly, I said, hell no. And they wouldn't stop. They wouldn't stop like asking me. So finally, to get them to stop asking me, I put a resume together, which I never had a resume because I actually just planted the churches that they were part of denomination, but I was never a part of a traditional church. And they were looking at 70 other candidates from all across the United States. I was the only one local, and I actually grew up here. Like I said, I went to high school and drove past this road that our church is on twice a day for my whole high school career. And they voted on me. They wanted me, and I was so hesitant. I was so real and raw. Like they asked me in this committee thing, they said, "What do you think your wife would feel about you pastoring this church?" And I said, honestly, she wants this more than I do. I'm really, really not. I don't think this is a good idea. To be honest, because I was just hoping they would say no. Anyway, they said yes. And God began to heal my heart through this whole process. Where I'm at with God is not where I was in California. And I tell this to my people. I tell them this. I'm still in transition here because it seemed like back then, man, things were going real well. And then when we moved out there and I left everything behind, I was just really hurt and jaded. And I thought, like, God, I gave up all this stuff for you. But then honestly, like, what did he give up for me? Right? I mean, we know it's sort of preachy, but he gave up his life. I gave up a career. I gave up some money. I gave up my identity for a minute. And that was hard because I had to figure out who I was now because I'm not that guy anymore. Who am I? So now I'm pastoring this church and it's been 18 months and man, the first year was great. It grew like crazy. Then COVID happened, which is awesome because we had just transitioned it just in time to be online and receive online tithe and kind of like, it just wasn't there. It just was a God thing. I'm much better today than I was back then, but I would be lying if I didn't say, you know what, there are some issues sometimes that I have trust in God. And I think it's okay to say that. I think God's a big boy. I think he can handle it, and I think other people need to hear me say that too, because I'm a pastor, right? So pastors are supposed to be perfect. That's not true at all. We are definitely forgiven and we do need to live our lives above reproach. And I think that's why we should probably be honest instead of lie and act like everything's always perfect, because it just isn't, man. Come on, anybody who's real and can look at themselves in the mirror knows they're not perfect. And I'm the first one I even posted on our thread today. I'm reading through Galatians with a couple of guys, and Galatians 2:20 is a verse in there. And it was the first verse I ever memorized as a Christian. And on the Facebook thread, I said, God, I hope, I pray something like this. It was something to this effect, that you would spark or rekindle the fire for you that I once had. That's on our church Facebook page. Like, I'm not trying to look, I love him and I want to love him more. And I want to be on fire. And there are moments where I am, but there are moments that I'm not. Right. So that kind of catches us up a little bit. There's so much more. There's Life 45. There's just some kind of, what do you think? All of that, what I've just said, what comes to your mind?
Well, I want to first point out that that's such a unique uh, admission from a pastor to admit that you sometimes struggle with your trust. And I really respect that, because as you and I discovered before we started recording, we spoke a lot about our past, our similarities, and how we both grew up in these churches and in these environments where, not being okay was not okay. And so you had to pretend to be okay, even though you weren't okay. And so that creates a real issue in many individuals, not all, because like you said, your wife was really good at being good. But for those of us that had struggles and that had to put on this face and put on this front, pretend like we were awesome and that everything was great, and you could never admit that when you're in the ministry. Another similarity, you and I both met our first spouses. Yours is your only still, but my first husband was, I met him in high school, and we got married when I was 18 also. So I relate to you in that. And the crazy thing is you go through that marriage not being okay and not being able to admit that you're not okay because you're in the ministry, and your pastor has to have a great marriage. You can't you right? You can't be a pastor and be struggling in your marriage. That's not allowed. You can't be struggling with major sin. That's not allowed. So you pretend like you're not, and you don't get help. And so it's interesting to me to hear you now as an active pastor who's admitting sometimes I'm not where I need to be. Sometimes I don't trust God the way I should. I struggle with that. God, help me to be back on, help me to have that fire again. Um, my question for you with that is, how does your church respond to hearing that out of their pastor?
I mean, they don't really. I mean, obviously, if well, they haven't fired me, so
So they're okay with it.
like I think that they love the fact that one of my biggest values, it's not actually one that's written down. I have F words for values and I've shared them with you before. But is authenticity. Like I can't put on a front. I am who I am. And I'm not going to act like the world's great for me if it's not, because that gets people into trouble. Pride will either lead, works-based righteousness or doing good. If you're good at being good, it leads to pride. And those are the people in the church that look down their nose at everybody that can't do it because they're not as good. They're not good at being good. Or it leads to despair. And that's what it did for me. So in our marital relationship, it caused problems early on because my wife was very prideful and she would admit it. And for me, because I wasn't good at being good, I was very despairing. And I would go down this deep, dark hole and get myself into, just trouble because, and I wasn't a pastor yet at this point, but I obviously was a Christian and I was actually studying to be a pastor. But point is, one of the things that you kind of brought up that I want to kind of extrapolate on, just being real, when we were first married, I grew up without a father. I grew up on the streets. So I had this view of what sex was that was totally not what my wife's view of sex was.
Mhm.
She was a virgin when we got married. I was not. And so therefore, here we are in the first year of marriage, and she really believed that sex was gross. And Mark Driscoll talks about this. And I believe that sex was God. And because I tried to have like a sexual relationship with her based on what I had seen growing up, which she didn't, that was confronted with her view of sex, which it's just gross. You just don't talk about it. You don't, it caused a rift. And I went dark. I went down into pornography, and she obviously just kind of maintained this level of pride. And it really came to a point where we just had to be completely honest. And the gospel started to heal us whenever I said, I realized that God doesn't love me when I'm good, just when I'm good. He loves me when I'm bad, which makes me good. And she's such a good follower, an amazing wife, that she began to see that too. So I repented of being bad and she repented of being good. And we realized that sex wasn't gross and it wasn't God, but it's a gift. It's a gift within a marital relationship. That was one of many things that we've had to work through in 20 years of being married and remarried and married and remarried, because you have to keep doing that to the same exact person over and over again, that we had to deal with. Because here's the deal. I am not going to act like everything's perfect. I just won't do that, because there's no power in that. There's like no power in pretending. I mean, I just saw a meme that's so true. It's like we've been wearing masks long before COVID to church, And how about we just remove the fig leaf and we go, okay, here we are. Like us or not, we want to get right. God loves us. So therefore, if we're honest, I think we would literally get a lot more accomplished within the church. They just do.
I do too. I think a lot of what you just said is so powerful, and I think it could help so many marriages and so many people. that distortion of how we view sex and marriage and that relationship. We come into these marriages so distorted and our thinking or not aligned with one another, and trying to heal and connect those two things together to make it work. It just seems, people got to figure this out on their own
Yeah.
because it's unspeakable,
Mm,
right? Like you can't talk about it.
yeah.
I mean, just the fact that you just dropped some bombs right there about it with truth and without shame and just said it for what it is. Like there's so much power in that. And I wish people would find that for themselves,
Yeah.
because it's such a powerful place to be able to say, I'm struggling with this. I need help. I'm not perfect. Our marriage isn't perfect. We need help in this area.
Yeah, and you're
So,
supposed to be able to go to the church. Like you really are supposed to be
right.
able to, that's the exact place you're supposed to be, but that's the exact place that judges you the most. And
Mhm.
I'm not saying that every church is bad or every church is like that. I'm just saying in my experience, that's and experience of people that I know, that's sort of what it was like. And so that's probably why I'm pastoring today still. And I'm going, we're not going to create that. Like if that's what you want, that, that I'm not your guy. And I'm totally cool with it. Because here's the deal, I don't need the money they pay me. I'm thankful for it, but I don't need it. And there are so many pastors that actually do. They do need the
Mhm.
money because they don't have a business. They don't have money that's coming in from another source. And I can just see the compromise. Let's just say that they took one of the people that came from out of state and they brought him here, right? And they interviewed him and they liked him. And so this guy moves his family across the United States and they come and they're pastoring this church and they have all of these ideas and they're really starting with a pure heart and they're so excited and they got two little kids and all of a sudden, the deacons and the people here that are powerful, they start saying, hey, Jimmy, we don't really like how you're preaching the vision that you got going on here, which they try to do that stuff with me, because that's the church is the way it is right now, dying because nobody wants to change. It's like weight loss. It's a good idea on Monday, but like by Wednesday or like Thursday, when you have to say no to the cake, it's not such a good idea anymore because we like the comfort of the way it's always been. Well,
Right.
then Pastor Jimmy, he's like, now he's stuck because he promised his wife this would be the last move because she cares about the two kids, wanting them to be rooted, established, not moving all over the place. And he promised her that if they came, if she would be willing to do this, I could just see the scenario, right?
Mhm.
That, man, it would be good and they'd do all these great things, but now he's getting the heat and the pressure. And if he don't do what they say, guess what? They can fire him. And if they fire him, then he's breaking his promise to his wife. So here's what he does. He compromises. He lets the vision that God put inside of him die because he doesn't have the guts to stand up to the people that have hired him and say, you know what, you don't own me. I'm not trying to be mean. I'm not trying to be rude. I'm not trying to be a jerk. I'm telling you, you brought me here because you believed that God had put a message and a vision in my heart to change this place. And if I'm not your guy, fine, fine. But Jimmy can't do that because Jimmy doesn't have any other income. And so many
Mhm.
pastors I know, they put all their eggs in one basket and now they're forced to compromise to save their marriage or to save their church or to keep the paycheck. And all of those things isn't necessarily a bad thing. I don't fault Jimmy. It's really the church. I'll share a quote with you that St. Augustine, he was an archbishop of Hippo, like 300 400 AD, awesome man of God. He said this. He said the church is a whore. He said the church is a whore, yet she's my mother. And you can just extrapolate that. You can kind of unpack that. Like there's all kinds of good things that the church offers, but at the same time, it's filled with sinful, broken people, and the worst of the people who don't see that they're sinful and broken.
Mm.
I don't know. I mean, we obviously went down
It's
that
really
road.
good.
I'm not trying to stay on that because I'm not really not bitter toward it. It's really the reason why I guess I keep doing what I'm doing, because I want people to really find healing and hope
Mhm.
for real, not just for fake. You know, Sunday morning is not enough.
Yeah. No, and that message is coming out strong and clear. There's no doubt about that. You bring a really unique perspective, and so yeah, from a coach's perspective, I see so many areas in which you could be and are such a tremendous coach. I know you are doing coaching now. I want to talk about this because my goodness, you could coach people on building a business. You could coach people on building a church. You could coach people on planting a church, being a pastor, being a good husband, making a marriage work through difficulty, kids, family. There's so many things that you could go down the different paths. But one thing right now we haven't gotten into is this whole health journey that you and your wife just went on. And you guys got into 75 hard. It sounds like that. Was that what kind of sparked it for you guys? And this major weight loss. And now you've written a book, and tell us what's going on. This is huge.
Yeah, I found out that when you have success in business, just because you have success in one area of your life doesn't mean that you automatically have success in another, and you have to be intentional. So when you start having success in business, you become lazy, and that's really what it was for me. And not lazy in terms of you could become that's the wrong word. You become comfortable, and so fitness was always something that's been close to Fran and I's heart. It's a value of ours. It's an F word, value of ours. And yet, because of the stress of the business and starting, pastoring this church at the same time, man, I kind of just let my health go. And my wife is the type of follower. She's a really good follower. She just is. And to this point, it's to a fault, because if I gain 10 pounds, she'll gain 10 pounds, and that's sort of what happened. So we got to this place where I just couldn't trust my own word. And I realized I was so frustrated with me that if I can't trust me and I can't lead me, then how can I lead you? How can I lead my church? How can I lead my staff? How can I lead my family? How can I lead? And so I just came to that place, and 75 hard was something that was sort of presented to me. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to do it. And my wife said she's going to do it too. We did it. And in 75 days, we lost 74 pounds. But out of that process, 2 workouts a day, we really, I like to say 75 hard, I'm so thankful for it. But what we did was we sort of took the nuts and bolts of that, like the Model T, and we kind of crafted the Corvette. So many people that started that program with us failed. Everybody did. Matter of fact, every single person that said, hey, I'll do that with you. And there was probably about 8 or 9 people. They just didn't finish it. And they restarted and restarted, still haven't finished it. Why? Why didn't they finish it? And so what we did was we wrote a book, and it made it as a #1 new release on Amazon. And I'm so thankful that it is a bestseller on Amazon. It's called Life 45. And what it's 4 simple steps to keeping promises to yourself and taking back your life. And it's so much more than weight loss. It's so much more than that. It's learning how to keep promises to yourself with 2 non-negotiables, and what we call, and this is like indigenous to us or proprietary to us. This is not 75 hard. This comes out of this process, and that is a gut-wrenching why. A gut-wrenching why is the first thing that you need in order to be able to keep a promise to yourself. And I'm talking about that why that kind of makes you sick to your stomach. Like, why do you really want to do this? And for me, it was, and I wrote it down, I write it down every day, is to trust my own word. Every day it's my gut-wrenching why, to trust my own word. And so when you have that in place, now you need to figure out what the way is. Like, you have the why, now the way. It's almost like if you're going through the woods, you're here at the wood line, and back there is somewhere you're trying to go. Well, if you don't have a clear path, how are you going to get through it? We kind of meander, we go back and forth. And that's why yo-yo dieting is such a thing, because we don't have a clear way. And so we have success, then we fall back down. We have success, then we fall back down. What we did was we codified a clear, what we call power structure. I call it the yellow brick roadmap. And in that, what we do is we sort of pare down, and you got to tell me how I'm doing on time too. So I know you got, we're busy here, but we start with this physical, and then we go to the emotional, and then from there it's mental, and then from there it's spiritual. And again, 75 Hard doesn't talk about anything about this, but if you think about it, most of weight loss just tackles the physical. I've put on some weight. I know I need to lose weight because you can see it, and therefore it manifests itself physically, but it's not just physical. You have to peel back the onion, and you have to understand that we eat with our emotions. Matter of fact, the Hebrew word for emotions is appetite, for soul is appetite. And so we literally cram our emotions down our gullet. When we're excited, we celebrate with food. When we're sad or depressed, we drown ourselves with food. So we have to dig down. there's like a stat out there, 70% of people who hit the lottery end up broke again in 2 years. Why? Because they were broke anyway. You just gave them money. And it's because they didn't actually fix the problem. They were broke with money. And then pretty soon they're broke without money. This is why yo-yo dieting is a thing, because they're not actually digging deep. The being overweight isn't the problem. It's the reason why we're overweight that's the problem. Well, that's what we tackle in our book. Why? So you got to go back down to the emotional seat, and you have to realize that we eat with our emotions, and we allow our emotions to dictate our actions. Successful people don't do that. Thin people don't do that. Those types of people allow their actions to dictate their emotions. Well, then you got to go down and peel another layer of that onion off and realize, okay, my emotions really are a byproduct or a manifestation of my thoughts, the things that I think about. What am I thinking about? Right? And I can extrapolate that in just a second, but when you peel that back, you go down to the very core of who you are, which is your erroneous core beliefs. That could be one story. There's a show on TV called The Biggest Loser years ago. And there was a woman on there that was working out, and in the middle of the workout, she absolutely broke down. Just broke down. I love the show. I love the premise of the show. You had the trainers that kind of pulled her off to the side. Of course, cameras are there, but she's just crying. She's tired. She's overwhelmed. And it wasn't anything that it had nothing to do with the workout, but the workout started to reveal these things. And she said, when I was a child, my dad used to call me Dumb Debbie. Dumb Debbie, Dumb Debbie, Dumb Debbie. That's Dumb Debbie. That's Dumb Debbie. And she said, my whole life, I began to believe that I was nothing. Believe I was nothing. The core belief system was erroneous, was false. It's what I call a scarecrow. It's that record player that you picked up from what grandma said, or your aunt, or a teacher, or a coach, or someone, a spouse, way back then, that plays in your mind. You're never going to be good enough. You're never going to be smart enough. You're just like your dad. You're not like your brother. Whatever these things are, they're erroneous core beliefs. And as a result, she started to think, I'm worthless. I'm nothing. I don't deserve anything. My dad doesn't love me. And these beliefs started to affect her emotions. You see, now I'm working back up. Now, because I am nothing, guess what? What makes me feel better is food. I'm going to insulate my pain with food. And you could literally see her emotions on her, to where now it just manifests itself in the physical realm because she's 200 pounds overweight. But that's not the problem. The problem is she needs to realize that she isn't damaged goods, that she isn't worthless, that someone does love her, that she does have dignity, value, and worth. And when you begin to isolate that scarecrow and burn it, we do this with no longer statements. No longer. There's a verse in the Bible that says, do not conform any longer to the pattern of this world, but be transformed. So we call them no longer statements. We have 45 of them in our book, one for every day. No longer will I allow my past to dictate my future. No longer will I allow what they said about me to define who I am becoming. No longer will I allow what I did back there to stop me from being who I can be today. And you isolate it, then you begin to burn it. So I say scarecrows because there's a verse in the scripture, it's Jeremiah chapter 10, verse 5. And he's talking about these idols, and he says, these idols cannot speak, but we give them a voice. They cannot walk, but we carry them. And it's just a metaphor for our lives, for the record player of the erroneous core beliefs that all of us have. And that is, what we do is we carry these scarecrows. And if you've ever seen a scarecrow, they're scary. They're designed to scare. It's like we carry these around and we put them up in the corners and the corridors of our heart in every room of our lives, and we position them because they can't walk. So we give them legs because we carry them, and then we allow them to speak. Well, you're never going to be good enough. You're never going to amount to anything. You'll never actually make it as a coach. You'll never actually succeed in this whole thing. Whatever it is, you'll never actually get to your goal weight. And it's like, no, that's not true. Where does that come from? And it's usually something that we picked up a long time ago. We need to isolate it with the no longer statement, and then positive affirmations, which I was sort of like on, but I'm telling you, reprogramming every single day. So in our program, every day we have to write down a no longer statement and a positive affirmation, isolate it and replace it. So I'll just give you mine and then I'll stop talking about this. I can let you. So today it's no longer will I get tired of the repetition of success. No longer. Because success is literally doing the same free throw over and over again 1,000 times a day. And guess what? Before you know it, you're like Michael Jordan, who can make a free throw in a game with his eyes shut. So no longer will I get tired. This is my newest one of the repetition of success. Here's the positive affirmation. I am a person who finishes what I start. And when I say this and write it down early, and I coach my people to do this, like early, you're getting these things done early and you're visiting them with conviction every day. Like, listen, I am not someone who gets tired of success, because that's what happens. We see success, and for some reason we start to hover over the brakes instead of pushing the gas. It's like when you see success, you need to hammer even harder. You need to go even further. You need to go even stronger. And we just don't do that because we see a little success. We get afraid of it, right? That's not what we're supposed to do. And of course, I'm a person who finishes what I start. I will get to my goal weight. I will accomplish the goals that I've put right here. I will run a marathon this year. I will do it. Unless God kills me, unless my legs are broken, like it's going to happen, right? Because I believe in myself. Why? I can keep promises to myself now. I've proven it, right? So that's sort of what Life 45 is in a nutshell. We're going all different places. I'm sorry about that.
No, we're not. This is great. No, that was so good. I think that's a book that so many people could benefit from, because you are getting down to the core of why people struggle. It is not for lack of information. It is not for lack of not knowing how to diet right or picking the right diet or the right exercise program. It goes deeper than that. And I'm a big believer in that. So I love what you teach. I'm so aligned with that. Like, you were dropping so much fire right there. I loved it. So I
Thank
think
you.
everyone that is struggling in that area could benefit from this book, because you're simplifying it for them. And the most powerful thing about all of it is that you've walked it. You've walked
Yeah.
that walk. You're not just talking about it. I'll be publishing this podcast next week. When I put it out there, I'm going to be putting that before and after picture of you up there for one of the marketing ads, because that is showing people that you have done what you are talking about. You are someone who you struggled with that. You were on the what failure ferry, is that what you call it?
Yeah, I call it the
Man,
failure fairy.
yeah, you were on the failure ferry, man. That's where you were. And you figured out, like, I got to do something about this. And it can't just be change my diet.
That's
It
right.
can't just be start exercising. It goes deeper than that. So I love that you and your wife did this. You guys wrote a book. Can we say that you've got another book coming up through the
Yeah,
pipes soon?
yes, yes, yes. We were talking about just before we started. I'm on my last chapter and probably halfway, three-quarters of the way through. It's called Blue Collar Millionaire, and it's 7 tactical steps to basically take your blue collar business to the point where, long subtitle, to the point where you can step aside, have more flexibility and freedom, or you can sell at a greater profit. And I'm excited about it because obviously that's another finance is another F word that I like.
Mhm.
You know, we'll talk about it.
That is a book that I need to read and that my husband needs to read. You and I were just talking about this because I can so relate to this, being so heavy in the business and working so hard inside of my businesses that I cannot step out and do what I love. And God, I need that book. That one I'm going to be looking for and watching. So Life 45 is on Amazon. You can order it there.
Yep.
You look it up underneath its title or underneath your name, Jeremy Candelaria. You're on Instagram. I know that. I know you guys also have a boot camp that you're launching that's coming up next week, right? Your wife, or you guys are going to run people through kind of like a coaching
Yep.
program. So
Yep.
you can help. So if people are struggling and they want to, get on board with what you're doing here with getting their health goals, committing to yourself and following through with the promise, right?
Yeah.
That's one of your big things. And it's something that I believe strongly about too. We lose confidence in ourselves because we have lied to ourselves so many times over. It's ridiculous. I'm going to do this. I'm going to change that. I'm going to start doing this. And then we don't. And
Yep.
so, if we had someone in our lives doing that to us all the time, we wouldn't believe a word they said. And
True.
that's what we do to ourselves, right? We're like, whatever, you don't ever follow through.
Yep.
So how can you invest in yourself when you don't believe in yourself? So you got to start from that point. And that's one of the things I know you're teaching in that book and that you'll be doing with people in the boot camp. So Jeremy, you got so many cool things going on. I could go another hour with you. I wish I didn't have something to go do right now because this has been so much fun. Let's do this again.
Yeah.
And I would love to have you on here again.
Yeah. And I just got to say, I'm so thankful for you. So thankful for what you're doing. I think Beautifully Restored is awesome. and I've been watching you. I've been watching what you're doing, and you're just grinding it out, and you're living your passions. And I think it's great. I think it's great to see somebody like you really, because it's us. Like, this is that you like saying you're me and I'm you. Like we're doing this. We're actually doing this. It's so cool. And hopefully it'll give somebody else some kind of guts that they could do it too, right? Uh,
Yes.
so I'm thankful for that. And I did want to say that if anybody is interested at all in sort of what Life 45 is about, if they just go to life45plan.com, just life45plan.com, then they can see it, they can sign up, they can kind of learn more, whatever. I wanted to kind of put that out there real quick. Sorry.
Yes. No, I'm glad you did. I want people to be able to find you. And, I'm a health coach too. I mean, I'm coaching people and I'm building my clients, and it doesn't bother me in one at all to promote you and to tell people about you, because I feel like that we can be used in different ways to reach different people.
That's right.
So I believe in you. I'm excited for you and your wife. You guys are amazing. I have so much admiration in my heart for you. I love that the two of you are doing this together, that
Mm.
you guys are doing life together, business together, all of this together. And my husband and I are very much the same way. In fact, I think the four of us were really the only married couples at that boot camp back in October. So it
Yeah.
was kind of unique that we were all there together. Jeremy, I just appreciate you. I think I actually I took away a lot of things myself today that I'm going to remember. Especially, I really like my biggest takeaway right now that I'm thinking about is that your statement that you were saying today. Like I don't want to get. I need to not get sick of doing the same things over and over, right? Like that's what success is. And you got to keep doing the grind and keep doing those things over and over and not get tired of that, because I grow weary sometimes. So I needed to hear that. So I appreciate that's a big takeaway for me. There's been a bunch of them. So,
Grateful.
well, we will conclude this. I'm definitely going to have you back on. And when you get your podcast going that we kind of mentioned, I'll be on there, man. Would love it.
Thank you, Mel. You're the best.
Thank you so much. Say hi to your wife for me, and you guys take care.